Hello and welcome to the Bomb Squad podcast. With me today we have
I am Tim M. Sullivan, and with me I brought a friend from out of state.
I'm Angie Hachiman.
we have a very special guest, and I'm Ethan. I'm sure I didn't mention that because I'm terrible at starting these. But today's subject is a really cool anime film, Hayao Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky, which will be celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. A lot of 35th anniversaries featuring robots on Bomb Squad. We just had Transformers a little while ago. And just hopping right in, I wanted to ask, I think we'll start with Tim. And then move on to Angie, and then finally with me because I'm always the most long-winded. What is your, before we discuss Castle in the Sky itself, what is your previous experience with Studio Ghibli films, particularly the films of Hayao Miyazaki?
Yeah. So I kind of started engaging with Ghibli stuff in I want to say 2011, 2012. It was shortly after I started college. I kind of started I'd been aware of Miyazaki, and I'd been aware of a lot of the movies. I'd always heard about Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away when I was in high school, but I hadn't watched them. So I think shortly after I started college, I kind of started going through those movies. I think this was back when they were still streaming on Netflix, which is something that nobody talks about. They always say that HBO Max is the first time Ghibli movies have ever been streaming. That's not true. They were on Netflix for a little while. But yeah, that's about when I kind of started to go through these movies. And yeah, Miyazaki is definitely a big part of that. I think at the time I really wanted to watch the stuff that he had been making, and for this podcast, I actually got to break open another disc from this box set I got a couple of years ago, the collected works of Hayao Miyazaki. Uh, I got that for Christmas a couple of years ago, and I haven't really watched a whole lot of stuff from it, but I've always really enjoyed having that collection set, and it was cool to be able to have an excuse to put something on from it. So that was fun, and I guess out of Miyazaki's works, I would say some of my favorites are probably, I would say Princess Mononoke is number one for me. Spirited Away might be number two. And then I also have sort of a soft spot for The Wind Rises, which is one that I feel like not as many people are as fond of because it's not as much of like a fantasy kind of thing. It's kind of closer to the same vein as Whisper of the Heart, where the fantasy stuff is there, but it's behind sort of a more grounded, real world kind of thing, which I thought was interesting, and it was definitely like a good send off for him as a director. So I guess, yeah, that would be kind of my experience with his prior works.
Yeah, it's definitely a good sort of swan song film for him to retire, and now he's making another film. Great, good on him. I mean, I'm happy. I'm glad there's another Miyazaki film coming out. But like, if he had left it on The Wind Rises, that would have been a good note. And it is sort of weird. I feel like I haven't revisited it since I saw it in theaters, and I do remember liking it a lot. I just haven't seen it since.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Miyazaki and my dad retire at about the same rate. My dad has retired like twice now, and he's still working.
I can't believe Miyazaki's your dad. You're Goro Miyazaki. That's possibly the most insulting thing I could have said. I'm so sorry, Tim. No, I'm kidding. We like Goro. We like From Up on Poppy Hill and nothing else. I haven't seen Earwig. I can't say. God, Tales from Earthsea is bad though. Oh, sorry. Oh,
you just hurt Angie's feelings.
I know. I actually like that one. It's one of my favorites.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I've also read the novels, so I find it kind of frustrating. But I understand. I understand why people like it. I know people who do really like it. And I appreciate that sentiment. There's a lot of cool stuff, and there's some cool ideas in Earthsea, but it doesn't gel with me. But I definitely get why people. I do see why people can enjoy it, certainly. And I don't mean to diminish that at all.
Yeah, I would say as far as Earwig goes, like I definitely get why people don't like it. I see it more as like it's structured more like a pilot than a movie, and I kind of appreciate it on that level.
Hmm.
But as a movie, it definitely has its issues. I think the animation being what it is,
Yeah.
personally, I'm fine with it because I think his prior works are kind of just him trying to be Miyazaki Jr. and it's him doing something a little different, which I think is kind of
Yeah.
neat. Uh, that's just how I see it, but I definitely get why people are like, "This is the worst Ghibli movie."
No, I get that too. Certainly, but moving on to the guest I have now insulted. Angie, what is your previous experience with Ghibli and Miyazaki?
I first started watching Ghibli movies in high school. So, as a long story short, I didn't grow up with anime. I was introduced to it in eighth grade. So, when I was in high school, I went over to a friend's place and she asked me, "Have you ever seen, Howl's Moving Castle?" And I was like, "What is that?" And she's like, "You've never seen Ghibli movies?" And I was like, "No, I'd never heard of that before." So she's like, "You have to watch Howl's Moving Castle." So that was the first Ghibli movie I ever watched. Um, and then she let me Spirited Away. And after that, I kind of, got into like a whole animated movie phase. And at that point, Ghibli was like the anime movies. Like I had no concept that maybe other studios probably made animated movies in Japan. To me, it was Ghibli was everything. So I went through and kind of started looking into the other Ghibli movies like Mononoke, Whisper of the Heart, The Cat Returns. Basically, all of them that I could find in English at the time. Um, so that was kind of like my first introduction to Ghibli. And then I had sort of like a resurgence when I started getting into my hardcore anime phase after I graduated high school and was in college. I went back and kind of rewatched everything and kind of found some of the newer stuff and caught up with some of the ones maybe I didn't see. Again, still kind of sticking to the stuff that was readily available and available in English. So I still haven't seen some of the ones that are some of the older ones, like what was it? I forget the name of them. There's a couple that didn't get released until recently, and I still haven't seen those ones. But but yeah, I always really liked Princess Mononoke. I think that's also one of my favorites. That's one that I probably rewatched the most out of them. I also really like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle, and I think Howl's Moving Castle's. I always found it kind of weird, but I think it's like special since it was like the first one I
Mhm.
watched. Um,
Never forget your
Yeah.
first.
right, and I watched Castle in the Sky both times that I went through like my Ghibli phase. So I watched it. This is my third time watching it.
Nice. Nice. No, I definitely get that. Particularly, I'm interested in how relatively late you guys got into Ghibli. I think just because I know you both. Well, I know Tim more closely, and Angie through Tim. That you guys are both big anime fans. As am I. But I always assumed everybody consumed Ghibli the same way I did, which was I saw the month of Miyazaki on Toonami. Let me see. I saw Spirited Away when it first premiered on television. I'm like, wow, this is really interesting, and I didn't see it through the first time because they did a couple screenings of it on TV. But there was like multiple channels that did months like Miyazaki marathon sort of things. Toonami is the big one. I think that's the one that the most people tuned into, and that's the one I saw the most. TCM did one that I did not see because I was a small dumb baby. I was an actual child. I was in grade school at the time, and the other one was the Disney Channel actually, which it wasn't like part of a major month of Miyazaki, but they would show those films sometimes during the day. That's actually where I saw My Neighbor Totoro for the first time, was on the Disney Channel, and they would usually screen the younger hewing ones, like Totoro and Kiki's, and I really loved those films the first time I saw them, and there was like a brief phase, like in high school, where I'm like, "Oh, Ghibli films, they're pretty good, but they're a little overrated." And then I saw them again after having not watched them in a long time, and I'm like, "Oh, wait, no, I'm wrong. These are just really, really good.
Yeah.
These are just exceptional films." And Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki's filmography and Isao Takahata's filmography are sort of big passions of mine. I've lectured on Miyazaki and Takahata's pre-Ghibli catalog. I did a lecture on Takahata's debut feature, Horus, Prince of the Sun, and Miyazaki's debut feature, Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, for local university, Webster University's Kinemati Fest animation festivals. And I really adore their work. I kind of get lost in their older catalogs, the pre-Ghibli stuff sometimes. But I really enjoy it, and they're films where I always find new things, new ways where they're sort of referring back to older elements. That's sort of one of my favorite pastimes when watching Ghibli films, when I'm not just completely enamored with the worlds, which is most of the viewing experience, but just spotting things that's like, oh wait, that's a thing from an old thing. I remember that. That was on a TV cartoon that Miyazaki watched or made a decade ago. And that sort of characterizes my relationship with the studio writ large, and Miyazaki in particular. I have a lot of affection for a fellow, and Takahata really, a couple of fellow leftists, people who at one point had Marxist leanings, even if Miyazaki got a bit more bitter as he got older on a political, and it really shows through in their films, and also people that give proper salaries to their employees instead of working on a contract basis. Studio Ghibli is probably the most ethical anime company, which I like, anime production studio. So like purely on like mostly nostalgia, mostly my love of the studio, but also I just like love the fact that they're not an awful company, relatively speaking, is nice.
Right.
But that's getting lost in the sauce. But sort of honing in on Castle in the Sky in particular, what is your previous experience with it? Not just like when you watched it, but your thoughts on it. Start with Tim.
Yeah. So like you had kind of mentioned the month of Miyazaki thing. Like, so I didn't grow up with cable, but like Toonami was something that whenever I would be at someone's house who had cable, I would always want to watch Toonami or watch Adult Swim. I didn't watch the month of Miyazaki, but like I think that's about when a lot of people started talking about it at my schools. Like that was when I kind of started hearing about Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, because those were like the movies that people were big into. I think I discovered. I think I first heard about like the existence of Castle in the Sky because like there was a version of Dance Dance Revolution where there was a song called Castles in the Sky. And so then, like, I guess I probably Googled that at some point and then, like, the movie came up or something.
I love that.
Just, like, a weird little tangential thing. But, yeah, that's one of the ones where, like, when I was going through the filmography, I didn't remember I didn't remember it super well from the first time I watched it. Like I think that was one where we had rented it through like the Netflix DVD service, and whatever the disc was that they sent, it was like kind of damaged, so like it was having trouble. Like it was like skipping at certain parts. And so like I watched it in kind of segments. Like I watched like part of it one day and then part of it another day or something like that. So it was a movie that like based on like my first experience with it, I didn't have a whole lot of real memory of. It didn't really stick with me the first time I watched it. So I think that kind of made it interesting to revisit because it was one that wasn't super fresh in my head. So it was just like a nice way to kind of experience it almost for the first time again, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, no, I get that. That's cool that you were able to sort of experience it properly again.
Yeah.
I'll reserve because I feel like I'll get lost in my own thoughts. Angie, your previous experience.
So I guess I think I was probably around like 14 or 15 when I first watched it back in high school. And like Tim, I didn't remember too much of the first part of the movie. The part that I always remember the most from Castle in the Sky is when they actually get to the castle in the sky. One of my favorite things that I always remember is the the uh, the robots with like the moss and grass and like flowers growing all over them. I always that's imagery that always kind of stuck with me. And the biggest thing that stuck with me was when the villain of the movie um, mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah.
Fire of heaven that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah in the Old Testament.
That was something that kind of like shook me because I don't think I saw too many like animated stuff that referenced the Bible, and that was always something that just stuck in my memory very vividly. That pretty much sums up my first experience. Like I said, I didn't like there was nothing else that particularly like I remembered or stood out to me. I guess I leaned more towards the other Ghibli films more than Castle in the Sky. But like I said, those two things, the robots and their kind of coexistence with nature, how the vines and the moss grow over them, and then the mention of Sodom and Gomorrah, that was definitely one of the biggest things that like shook me as like a 15, 14-year old. At the time I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said that.
No, I get that. Yeah, particularly if you've never seen something, like if it's one of your first times, and even in a Ghibli film, it's so rare. Like, if you're watching Evangelion or something that's a bit more close to the edge, a bit more contemporary, or that deals with that sort of thing.
Did you know that those cross explosions were religious imagery? What?
Uh, and then it turns out it's just, yeah, we just used that imagery because it looked cool and we didn't think it was going to get exported. And I love that. I love how frank they are about that. Ano is, but anyways, that's another cast. We'll talk about Evangelion later. But
I love 1 hour photo.
Neon Genesis Evangelion. Wow.
my own thoughts of the film, it's one that kind of passed over me. I'm not gonna lie. Like when I saw it for the month of Miyazaki, I think something about it, it just kind of got after Spirited Away, and particularly after I think Nausicaa, after seeing that, it didn't stick in the brain in the same way. Which is not disparaging to it at all. Again, I was a dumb baby who didn't know anything, and it wasn't really. I never really properly revisited it until Fathom put it back in theaters not too long ago. I think when I was a freshman in college, it took me that long to properly revisit the film, and I appreciated it a lot more then. I think you can. I mean, I'll get into the specifics later, but. As a fun adventure story, it is something that sort of stands out, at least as a film in Miyazaki's catalog. Like it ticks a lot of boxes, but at the same time, it's unique in a way. He doesn't do as many sort of straightforward science fiction-y adventure stories in film. Really, after Castle in the Sky, that's sort of. He kind of washes his hands of that, and it's in a lot of ways it's a culmination of things, which is neat. But again, I won't get into that too much now. There's time to ramble later, as always, and I guess that leads pretty neatly into overall thoughts on the film. Tim starts off.
Yeah, we watched it yesterday afternoon, and I would say it was enjoyable. I would say it's probably not in like my top 5 Miyazaki movies or anything, but like I enjoyed it a lot. I thought that the villain was kind of captivating, and like I really enjoyed like the imagery with the robots and the nature, which like Miyazaki is always doing his sort of environmental message. But I thought it was kind of cool here. And like, yeah, the robots are really cool. And like we watched the dub, and the performances were enjoyable. Like James Van Der Beek as the little child was just kind of funny. Like I feel like I mentioned this while we were watching it. Like I feel like after he got that role of playing like a 16-year-old at age 30, that kind of just typecast him as child roles. uh but yeah, I thought that I enjoyed his performance, and Mark Hamill as the villain was very enjoyable. He's always a good villain. uh After his performance as the Joker, he's definitely like made his mark. Hamill, even
God.
as a villain type character.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, and particularly with regards to Joker, I love when Mushka starts getting kind of particularly villainous, more outwardly so, and
Yeah.
he really starts jokering at the end there, with like his laughs,
Yeah.
and his more sinister voice.
Like, we were watching with captions, and the captions would always say "laughs wickedly,"
God,
which was funny.
I love that. God.
But yeah, it was enjoyable to watch, and yeah, it was. I was glad to revisit that one because, I feel like I watched a lot of the Ghibli movies kind of close together, so they all kind of mesh together in a way, and like movies like Castle in the Sky and Nausicaa and Princess Mononoke, they all have their very striking similarities, sort of,
Mhm.
but I think they're all very strong in their own way as well. So I think it's kind of good to visit each one on their own. And so it was good to revisit this one.
For sure. No, I definitely agree. I think they can in some ways blend together, and I'll not in like a bad way, but just in terms of thematic stuff and visual
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
But and I'll get into more to that later, of course. But that is a good point, particularly those early films, when Miyazaki's clearly getting more comfortable with directing the feature format stuff. And I understand why it doesn't necessarily stick out in the mind too. At the same time, as a result. But yeah, no. Hey, Angie, what were your thoughts on the film, particularly revisiting it?
Like Tim, I'd say it's not one of my favorites, but I think it's a really fun adventure. One of the things I appreciated, like revisiting it, was kind of how well like the narrative like moved, so to speak. Everything kind of flowed well together. Like there was nothing that kind of didn't make sense. It all kind of flowed very well together, like especially because I remember them being involved with the pirates, but I never remembered exactly like how that happened. But the way it happened in the movie, like revisiting it, it makes like a lot of sense how they how he kind of got involved with them and how they ended up kind of working with them and kind of becoming their friends. And I think it's very like a very simple adventure story, so I think it's something that would be really great for like kids, in a good way, not saying that in a bad way. I think it's a good movie for a good like kind of adventure story that's not not kind of talking down to anyone, but very simple and easy to follow. So I think it's a good movie for kids could enjoy. I also picked up more on like the environmentalism, like knowing what I know about Miyazaki now and rewatching it, I could pick out a lot of the scenes and the moments where they're kind of hinting at some environmental themes in it. And I think still, even from the past and now, my favorite part of the movie is always when they actually get to the castle, and everything that happens after that point is still always my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, for sure. I think Laputa itself is such a big high point, and I do agree with the overall sentiment of the way it flows. Like it's sort of always going for the most part, but you do get those soft moments, like those very occasional moments of rest. It doesn't really give you. It gives you just enough time to sort of get your bearings and get a better understanding of the characters. But there is a sense of constant movement throughout the film that I really appreciate. It makes it a really fun adventure story, and again, like something that, like you said, I think that would really jibe with like how children consume things, particularly in that it doesn't really give them an opportunity to get too bored There's always a little bit of something, but it doesn't totally overwhelm the senses, which is a tightrope to walk, certainly, but one that Miyazaki walks really wonderfully. And I guess that'll transition into my thoughts on the film. And I like it a lot. I think it's very enjoyable. And on this watch through, particularly after doing, like, having done a lot of research and reading a lot of books and things, like a big dumb nerd, for a class proposal I was making, it's remarkable how much this film is sort of a greatest hits for Miyazaki of, like, everything he'd worked on prior, and not in a bad way, not in like oh, he's recycling ideas, that sucks, but in like you see a lot of things coming together. Particularly, it's him sort of returning to the characters of Conan and Lana from Future Boy Conan, with Paozu and Shita, in some ways. Like Paozu is very different from Conan in some ways, but particularly when he kicks off his shoes, and he starts charging up the tube, the robot tube on Laputa, and when he's sort of ambling around, that sort of acrobatic sense is very much Conan, and he's re-exploring some ideas, but in many respects in sort of a more complex way. Like, obviously, he's limited in the sense that, he doesn't have 26 episodes of television to work with here. But it's cool seeing him sort of return to some ideas, and also just remix others, or just like reusing little things like the designs. Like the Laputan robot is originally from an episode of Lupin the Third Part 2, the last one, actually. That design is just recreated whole hog. And or even small things like you'll notice the car that the pirate gang uses in the opening, the Dola gang, I think, uses in the opening of the film. That's actually Sherlock Hound's car from Sherlock Hound, or a very, very close approximation of it. And even the outfits are similar to the white outfit that Moriarty would wear in that. And it's fun just seeing him reuse these ideas that he never really got a chance to like necessarily see to fruition or use in his most ideal capacity, like the way he wanted to use it, for like a proper full budgeted feature this time, instead of the constraints of television animation, where he still uses them admirably, but maybe not in the way he would want. Notorious perfectionist and curmudgeon Miyazaki. And I won't go on beyond that, because that's the thing that I mostly got away with it, and I think both of you put a really nice bow on why the film works super well. So I won't belabor that point too much. But speaking of our new Conan and new Lana, what were your guys' thoughts on the leads, Paozu and Shita?
Yeah, I mean, I thought they were compelling characters to kind of follow. Like, there's sort of like a sense of mystery with Shita that kind of made her interesting as you continue to learn more and more about her. And like in that opening scene where they're on the ship and like she just busts a bottle over somebody's head, like that immediately it gets this point across of like she's this strong character who's getting the hell out of here. And like that kind of made her interesting to continue to follow. And then like you see her falling with the crystal, just kind of having her slowly glide down. That kind of made her interesting. And then Pazu's just kind of like fun, scrappy little dude who like he's so like hard-headed, and like he doesn't think so much for his own safety as much as just like getting done whatever he needs to get done. Like he'll just like make a 2-meter jump onto some pillar in the hopes that maybe he'll survive. Like he has like Nathan Drake physics where he'll just jump onto like some cliff and he'll just climb it. And that made him fun to watch, in that like he was just like this little survivor.
Yeah, he's very
I guess.
He's very determined to like get things done.
Yeah.
I agree. Like particularly when somebody else is in danger, he's very stubborn and single-minded in his pursuit of helping them, which is always an appreciable quality in a protagonist.
Yeah.
Angie, your thoughts on Paozu and Shita?
Well, the one of the big takeaways that I got, especially while I was watching the movie, was just how brave these two children were. Like, I just appreciate how they were willing to, jump out and climb on the side of, airships and a floating island with like nothing beneath them. That I think that took a lot of courage for them to kind of, do stuff like that. Because I'm a full-grown adult and I couldn't do that. So I really appreciate how brave these two children were throughout the movie, and they were very they didn't really give us, especially Pazu. He was very much not really one to give up. There was that one moment, like kind of in the middle, I guess, where I guess it was good for their character development, where they almost gave up, but then they didn't. Especially when you get that scene where Pazu walks back home and then he is confronted by Dola, and she's like, "Hey, she made a deal. You think you're gonna keep her alive? You got to make a decision, or you're gonna come with us. You may never come back here." And he's like, "I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go and save her, and find the castle in the sky like I want to." So, I guess there was some determination there. And what else? I think Sheeta was interesting, like from an emotional standpoint, especially at that time as well, like where she's almost kind of giving up, and then she remembers the spell her grandmother taught her, and then she recites it, and then all that just starts all kinds of stuff going on. That was kind of an interesting part of the movie too. I guess that's kind of my basic thoughts. They're kind of simple characters, but in a good way. They're not too complicated, but they're interesting enough that you get invested in kind of what they're going through, and you kind of want to see them, kind of succeed in the end.
Yeah, I would say particularly them being sort of straightforward characters is to their benefit. Like they don't they have their minor failings, their minor inconsistencies, but more than anything, they're pretty straightforward, good people, set up against like incredible odds. I think, particularly with regards to their courage, I like the sense that you get that like they both do courageous things without like the motivation of helping one or the other, or like the need to, like, obviously Sheeta climbs out onto that airship in the opening. Or Paozu will do things without necessarily having Sheeta's motivation, but because they do have other motivations. Obviously, he wants to find Laputa to sort of validate his father and redeem his father. Yeah, redeem that legacy. And Sheeta has her own familial connection to Laputa. There's a sense of multiple motivations. It's not purely romantic, but particularly, and even how the romance is handled between the two characters, the way that they don't kiss. And Miyazaki did comment on that specifically, being like, I don't want to make them kiss. That would completely change the dynamic of their relationship. Which I think is a good decision ultimately, because there is a sense that they care about each other very deeply, and it's probably romantic maybe, but it doesn't have to be. They can just be good friends who happen to be a boy and a girl,
I like that it's kind of left open to interpretation. There's nothing like explicitly romantic about their interactions. Mm-hmm. It's like you said, they do have their own motivations separate from each other. It's not just that they want to save each other. That's part of it, but they got their own things. Like Sheeta wants to know more about herself, and like you said, Pazu's trying to
redeem,
find the Laputa for his father to validate his claims, because he was called a liar.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's a really good thing. But there's a sense also that they complement each other in a way that builds them up. Like that makes them better people in a way. Not like morally, but like makes them feel more confident in themselves, and more willing to do things that they might not normally do. Which is sort of how things happen in real life a lot of the times. At least from my experience. Sometimes I don't feel terribly motivated. But if I know I'm doing something for somebody else, it makes me more inclined to do it than if it was just for me. And I think
they worked. Oh, sorry. They worked really well together. I think it's like you said. I think separately by themselves they wouldn't be as good as they are together, in a way.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, I just think they're very compelling. Even if they are straightforward, they're maybe not as complex as a Nausicaa, or that sort of thing. But they don't really need to be. They serve their perfect purpose for the narrative. And they don't feel just like tools for that. They feel the exact right amount of rich and nuanced that they need to be. But beyond those two, I'm curious. I'm doing it again, saying I'm curious. Did you guys have any thoughts on the other characters, like the military guys, the Dola gang, the boss, the engineer, or Mushka, or anybody else? Obviously, I was just throwing those as a few examples out there.
Yeah, like I thought Muska was a really compelling villain character. I enjoyed kind of seeing his struggle to become like the king of Laputa, and his struggle with Pazu and Shita trying to thwart his plans. I thought watching him as a villain was entertaining, and then like I thought that Dola was a fun character. Those are kind of the ones that jump out to me as kind of being standout characters, I guess I'd say.
For sure, yeah. I think Mushka in particular, like he, there's a bit of DNA from previous characters again, particularly like Count Cagliostro, of course. They have similar dynamics, and that they're trying to attain royalty, and even the way the stone is used to open a door, similar to like the treasure.
The stolen treasures!
At the end of Cagliostro, to unlock ruins. But
I love Howl's moving Castle of Cagliostro in the sky. I ruined my joke.
Oh, you got it. Howl's moving Castle of Cagliostro in the sky. I love that. That's a good bit. Writing that one down for my stand-up that I will never do. No, I definitely agree with the sentiments. I think the Dola gang as well, and the lead, the matriarch of the Dola clan, is a very, very fun character. Particularly her dub performance. Cloris Leachman is really, really good in that role. But yeah, no, I think all the characters are a lot of fun. Oh, and the engineer husband, who is just Dr. Eggman.
Oh yeah, no, that was something that was like one of the few things that I did remember from prior viewings, because like when I saw that character, I had to like take a picture of him on my phone. It's like, this is Dr. Eggman.
Yeah. No, funny enough, he's another reused design too. He's
Really?
originally from the other episode of Lupin the Third that Miyazaki directed. Interestingly enough, I mean there are some minor differences.
I didn't remember that one.
But yeah, that one was Flight of the Albatross or Albatross Eyes. Good lord, I can't remember. It was one of the ones that was dubbed and brought over by Streamline as part of the Tales of the Wolf package.
Okay.
But that's enough rambling about obscure dub stuff. Angie, your thoughts on the rest of the cast, aside from Pazu and Shita?
Like Muska definitely is a really fun villain character. What I enjoyed about him was that he was just willing to sacrifice absolutely anything for his goal, his admittedly selfish goal. Like he brought all these military guys, and he is just like, yeah, I'm just gonna kill all these guys. He just did not care about anything other than his own goals, and I think for a villain, I think that's kind of fun and interesting. And then of course Dola is really cool, especially since she's a woman and an older woman too, being really being really awesome and in command. And I thought like the rest of the Dola gang were pretty kind of fun, like comic relief characters, especially her sons. They were kind of fun, goofy characters that kind of added a little bit of that comic relief to the movie.
Yeah, for sure. Like when they're I mean, all their scenes are great, and then the one where they're all trying to court Shita. I think that's a fine line to walk sometimes, but I think they handle it in a way that's cute more than anything, and fun. With them being very sort of silly and childish in a way that makes the whole situation very approachable and fun. My opinions on the characters. Again, I like the Dola gang as well. I kind of like the lead, Dola herself, in that she kind of reminds me of like almost an older, sort of very cantankerous Nausicaa, particularly when you see her piloting the glider and when she's knocked out and she pulls up, like that determined look. Everything about the way she pilots it very much reminds me of how Nausicaa pilots her the Meve, her little glider, in that film, which I like. I like the idea that this character is even like the pink hair, sort of like almost the red fading to gray. There is almost a quality of that to her, or like even the pigtails on her, like the way that she's clearly an older woman, but she wears her hair in a very sort of almost juvenile, like childish sort of way, that sort of represents how young at heart she is very cute and fun, and I dig it. Much like the rest of this film.
Yeah. Going off the pigtails thing, I did enjoy like that moment where Ishita had just been shot by Muska, and like he shot off her pigtails, and then Dola kind of consoles her, and it's just like, nothing worse than getting your pigtails shot off.
I love that because it very directly implies that it's happened to her before, probably multiple times, I wouldn't doubt, which is very, again, just a cute moment. Again, there's a lot of like even kind of subtle characterization for these very over-the-top characters that is sort of a staple of Miyazaki films and probably what makes them so compelling. I love stuff like that. But yeah, the Dola gang and Muska, his performance, particularly I think Hamill has a really outstanding performance. A lot of these characters would get worse performances. I know somebody will care about this, so I want to bring it up briefly. This film has another dub that exists. It's actually the first Miyazaki film to be brought over dubbed and without any edits. No Warriors of the Wind here, no Princess Zarna. But the dub was distributed by Streamline Pictures, but was not dubbed by them actually. It was dubbed for Japanese airlines. To be distributed on those for passengers who speak English to watch the film. It is not a good dub. Carl Masick, actually, that's what spurred him on to be like, let us dub Kiki's Delivery Service and Cagliostro and Totoro. Was he didn't like the dubs that were made for Porco Rosso or Castle in the Sky. And those performances are not good. They're kind of fun in their own way. They're silly. They're not like the worst things in the world. But they're a far cry from the Disney dub, which is generally of higher quality. But I mentioned that just because those characters are voiced. That can fit into the character section, sure. And somebody would have mentioned if we hadn't mentioned it. But I do recommend seeking it out, just in terms of it being an interesting kind of fun thing to see these characters being played in a different way. Alternate dubs are always fun and interesting like that, particularly stuff like really early stuff, and it's always fun to spot out because I think like it's nowhere near as good as like Leachman's performance in the dub, but I think the Dola's performance in that dub is fun in its own way, maybe a bit closer to the Japanese almost in a way. If that's something that matters to you, it does not matter to me, but and I'll leave it at that. As we conclude characters. And finally, I have two questions, just because it's sort of iconic. It's like Angie mentioned at the top, like when you think of this film, the iconic scene is very much the Laputan robot reaching down in front of Paozu and Shita, the one covered in moss. And so I'm curious about your opinions on the Laputan robot itself, as well as the entirety of Laputa, the nation, and sort of its history. Is this world conquering entity that we don't really get to see much of outside of what is told to us by Muska and the little bits of technology that are still functioning.
Yeah, I thought that the Laputan robots were like really cool. They had a really cool design, and like Angie kind of mentioned, the way they kind of intertwine with nature was something that gave them a lot of character, and they kind of have that quality of like the gentle giant that like you think it's gonna be this dangerous thing that's gonna hurt you, but it actually is just like trying to protect and preserve the nature of the Laputa. And like I think the kind of like lore and background of Laputa was really interesting and captivating. And I guess I can kind of shoehorn a thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about thoughts of the film into this category. When I was watching it yesterday, I had just like this mind blown moment where I realized that one of my favorite episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh riffs off this movie. There's a 3-part filler episode after the Duelist Kingdom saga where they get stuck into this VR game and they have to defeat the Big Five to escape this VR game. And there's a sequence where they have to get onto this like proto airship thing and go to the Castle of Dark Illusions in the sky. And like for whatever reason, that it never occurred to me that that was like doing this movie. And when I was like seeing the little like airship and seeing the castle in the sky, I was just like, whoa, that's this thing.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that the civilization it's sort of shrouded in mystery, just interesting in its own way, and the Laputan robot is cool and good. I love it. It's a good boy, and I'll save my thoughts for my dedicated time. But Angie, your thoughts?
Like I mentioned before, like when they get to Laputa, that's like my favorite part of the movie. I always like the concept of like the robots intertwined with nature. There's a like like kind of a tragedy to it, you know, because they're operating there, you know, long after people have, you know, have gone, and they're still there kind of protecting nature. And I like how you only have like the one robot left. All the other ones have long stopped functioning and have been like almost fully consumed by nature by that point. I also think I like the kind of mystery around, you know, the civilization. That was something I was thinking about yesterday after we watched it. You know, kind of like what it was, the story, the history of this place, because they don't really exactly tell you, because you know, it's kind of somewhat of an unknown. I would kind of theorize that maybe it's sort of a story, like a classic story of like hubris, you know, kind of causing the downfall of the civilization. You know, that's kind of why you assume that they kind of returned to the earth. There was also that, which is tied into one line where you said like all stones return to the earth earlier in the film. I think that was kind of you know, something interesting, where it's like they were too full of themselves and they built this floating island, but you know, kind of like there was something wrong about that, so that's why they decided to return to the earth, and the island, the floating island, kind of became consumed by nature in a way. I think it's very interesting. Like I said, it's my favorite part of the movie, especially from a conceptual standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. I think getting into like the roots, the way nature has sort of taken over this ancient society is really interesting. And particularly, you know, obviously the finale where the island, literally like all remnants of it, all vestiges of it sort of just break apart, and all that is left is the natural world as it sort of floats up into the sky. I like that. I think that's a good coda to put on it, instead of just the island like crashing into the sea or anything like that. Sort of the opposite.
Yeah, I guess you could say it's symbolic, because like the part of the island that broke down was the human part of it, and it left the giant tree and nature remained afterwards.
Yeah, no, exactly. My and particularly like what you're discussing, like the only robots that are still around and seemingly in like pristine condition are these machines of war that are just sort of waiting to be deployed, and the only ones that seem to still be active, or the only one that seems to be active, is this sort of gardening machine, this one dedicated piece that sort of has to live out the rest of its days. Which I like. I like that sort of a nice juxtaposition that makes them into more than just weapons of war. A lot of the character acting you see in the Laputan robot is it's very charming. The little quirks, little movements, and the way like it can be so tender with Shita, the one aunt that is activated by her request for help, and the way that Shita responds, like even when she's waiting for when she's like yelling when everything is burning around her and she's yelling for help, she can find it in her to grasp the finger, the hand of the dying robot, which is such a cute moment that I really love, and really helps humanize these machines, as sort of the last Laputans in a way, more so even than maybe Muska or Shita. And the whole thing is just really neat. And I won't get into much more than that. Aside from the Laputan robots are cool and good, once again. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
Yeah, I guess to just kind of reprise what I've been saying. I think this was an interesting one to revisit, and I definitely enjoyed revisiting it, and I enjoyed watching the dub, which I hadn't watched the dub. I watched it in Japanese, but it was so long ago that I can't really compare it to the Japanese version. But I did enjoy the dub, and I enjoyed revisiting a Miyazaki film that I didn't have a whole lot of memory of. So yeah, it was just a fun one to revisit.
For sure. Angie?
Yeah, I guess my overall thoughts is that it's a fun, a little adventure movie, great to show kids. I think that would be very enjoyable for them. And overall, it's just kind of a fun movie. Like I said, not my favorite, but definitely something enjoyable to pass time with. Especially like I said, if you have like young kids or anything, and you want to have like a fun movie to watch with them, I think this is a good one.
For sure, yeah, no. My final thoughts are I enjoyed revisiting it. I thought it was very interesting. Again, coming back and seeing it as sort of like representative of a lot of Miyazaki's ideas. In the same way, almost Wind Rises could be is a swan song for sort of the latter half of his career. I would argue Castle in the Sky would have been a really good coda for that first half, just like the perfect culmination of everything, and a good note to leave out on. But thankfully he didn't. He continued to make extremely good movies, arguably even better depending on your personal preferences. I don't want to pass judgment on anyone who really likes Castle in the Sky or really doesn't. But I really liked revisiting it. It was a lot of fun. And with that, I won't go on too much longer. I think that'll bring things to a close. For those of you listening on the audio platforms, if this is your first time and you're not, be sure to give us a follow or a like, or a thumbs up, 5-star, etc., etc. If you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to give us a like, a subscribe, and we greatly support your appreciate. No, we greatly appreciate your support, and your tuning in to the Bomb Squad podcast. And we do ask that you join us next week for a Tim Sullivan hosted anime pod on Cowboy Bebop the movie. Full title is Knocking on Heaven's Door. That's it. Yeah, Cowboy Bebop the movie, Knocking on Heaven's Door, which he will lead 2 anime in a row. It's a Christmas miracle.
That's right.
Somebody has...
Hell yeah.
That's the reason Tanner's not here, is we shoved him in another room and said, hey, we're talking about anime for 2 weeks. And he hasn't realized that the room is unlocked. I'm kidding. Tanner is sitting right next to me, to be clear. That was Tanner. And so join us next week for that. We're very excited to see you.
Real quick, just thanks for Angie coming on the podcast. Enjoyed having you on here. Looking forward to future casts that you'll be joining with us.
Yeah, it was my pleasure joining you. I hope you invite me on more anime-related podcasts. I unfortunately don't know too much about movies, but I do know about anime a little bit, so I look forward to joining you all again.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was a real treat having another voice here with us. And it's always cool hearing your thoughts. You were wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the invite, Tim. I really enjoyed it.
Take care, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Farewell.
Bye-bye.
I slid my ticket across the table and I said, sorry guys, I gotta see about a girl.